There is a difference between being lonely and being alone. One is a hunger for connection that cannot be satisfied. The other is a quiet feast of the self. In a world that praises the noise of crowds, there is a silent psychology at work in those who willingly step away, not out of fear, but out of a deep, fulfilling preference for their own company. It begins not with a decision, but with a feeling. The feeling of exhaling after holding your breath for too long. For some, this happens at the edge of a crowded room, where the voices blur into a single, draining hum. For others, it happens on a Friday night when the phone doesn't ring, and instead of despair, there is relief. The world often mistakes the two for the same thing. Loneliness is an ache that reaches outward, searching for a hand to hold. Solitude is a stillness that turns inward, discovering it already has its own hands clasped gently together. The person who loves staying alone has learned to tell them apart. They have felt the sharp sting of loneliness, perhaps often. They have also felt the soft warmth of chosen quiet. They know that being left alone is a wound, but being allowed to be alone is a gift. This distinction is not taught in schools. It is learned in the private moments when the front door clicks shut and the noise of the outside world becomes a muffled memory. The shoulders drop, the mask slips, the breath deepens. In that moment, the room is not empty. It is full of space that finally fits. They are not running from the world. They are returning to themselves. Long before they understood it, they were building it. The inner world is not constructed overnight. It is slowly furnished over years, like a room no one else is invited to see. For the child who played alone in the backyard, talking to insects or naming the clouds, the foundation was laid early. For the teenager who retreated to their bedroom while voices argued downstairs, the walls went up not as a prison, but as a necessary shelter. This is where the architecture begins. Sometimes it is born of temperament, a nervous system that processes the world too deeply, too quickly, finding crowds exhausting long before it has the vocabulary to explain why. Other times, it is born of necessity, a childhood where safety was found in corners, not in arms, a home where the loudest voice was also the most frightening, and silence became the only reliable friend. But the inner world is not merely an escape. It is a creative act. In solitude, the mind learns to entertain itself. It builds narratives, imagines futures, replays memories, and edits them into something softer. The person who loves being alone has often spent decades in conversation with themselves. They know the cadence of their own thoughts. They have learned which memories to revisit and which to let settle at the bottom. This world is not barren. It is lush with reflection. And once it is built, it becomes the place they long to return to, not because they hate the world outside, but because this world, their world, fits them perfectly. The body knows before the mind has words for it. When the person who loves solitude finally steps away from the noise, something physiological begins to shift. The heart rate, perhaps unnoticed in its elevation, begins its slow descent. The shoulders clenched against the invisible demands of social performance release their tension. The breath, which had been shallow and quick, deepens into something that reaches the belly. This is not poetry. This is biology. For the introverted nervous system, social engagement is not merely tiring, it is metabolically expensive. The brain processes every facial expression, every tonal shift, every unspoken cue with an intensity that the social world never reimburses. Dopamine, the chemical of reward, flows more freely in solitude for these individuals. The stimulation of the crowd does not energize them, it depletes them. Neuroscience reveals that the default mode network, the part of the brain that activates when we are at rest, when we daydream, when we reflect, functions differently in those who crave solitude. For them, this is not a passive state, it is a productive one. In the quiet, the brain sorts through the clutter of the day. It makes connections, it processes emotion, it heals. They are not doing nothing, they are doing the deepest work of all. They are allowing the mind to catch up with itself, to integrate the fragments of experience into something coherent. The stillness is not empty. It is full of neural activity that cannot happen in the presence of others. The body, in its ancient wisdom, knows this. It craves the quiet, the way it craves sleep, not as an escape from life, but as a preparation for it. And yet, the quiet is not always peaceful. Sometimes it arrives with a shadow. The person who loves staying alone knows this shadow well. It appears on Sunday afternoons when the light slants through the window just so, and the silence feels less like a blanket and more like a verdict. It whispers, "Everyone else is out there. Why are you in here?" Society has a voice, and that voice is loud. It tells them that joy is communal, that love is proven by presence, that a life lived alone is a life half lived. The invitations that go unanswered accumulate like mail left in the box. The well-meaning questions, "Are you seeing anyone? Do you get lonely in there?" land softly but leave bruises. They begin to wonder if their preference is a flaw, if their peace is actually a prison they have built for themselves. This is the sting. It is not the solitude itself that hurts. It is the judgment of it. The internalized suspicion that maybe, just maybe, they are doing something wrong. So they build a shield, not of hostility, but of quiet certainty. They learn to say no without explaining. They learn to let the phone ring without guilt. They learn that protecting their peace is not the same as pushing people away. The shield is not meant to keep others out permanently. It is meant to keep themselves intact. Still, the doubt returns sometimes, in the small hours, in the spaces between breaths. But they have learned something important. The sting is temporary. The peace is not. The shield is not made of stone. It is made of knowing. Knowing that the shadow is only a shadow and that the light will return when they are ready to step back into it. It rarely arrives with fanfare. There is no orchestra, no sudden revelation, no lightning strike of clarity. Instead, it comes on an ordinary evening, perhaps a Tuesday, perhaps a Thursday when the rain is tapping against the window and the kettle has just boiled. They are sitting alone, as they often do, and they notice something has shifted. The silence does not feel heavy anymore. It feels like a presence, a companion. For years, they may have wondered if this preference for solitude was something to overcome, a phase to outgrow, a wound to heal. They waited for the day when they would finally feel the lack, the aching void that others assured them would appear. But on this ordinary evening, they realize the void is not there. In its place is something they cannot quite name. Contentment, perhaps, or something quieter than contentment, a settledness. They look around the room. The books on the shelf, the mug in their hand, the rain on the glass. This is their life. This is their company. And for the first time, they do not question whether it is enough. They simply know that it is. The arrival is unannounced because it was never meant to be a destination. Wholeness does not arrive like a train at a station. It grows slowly, like moss on stone, invisible until one day you notice the green has covered the gray entirely. They did not find themselves. They simply stopped losing themselves in the expectation of others. In this moment, they understand something profound. They were never half a person waiting to be completed. They were always whole. They just needed the quiet long enough to feel it. To love staying alone is not to love staying away. This is the paradox that the world often misunderstands. The person who guards their solitude is not incapable of connection, they are. In fact, often more capable of it, precisely because they do not use relationship as a distraction from themselves. They have learned the art of intimate distance. When they enter a friendship, they enter it whole. They do not bring the desperation of need, the hunger for validation, the quiet panic of someone who cannot bear to be alone. They bring presence instead. They listen differently because they have spent hours listening to themselves. They speak differently because their words have been weighed in silence before they are offered. They are not looking for someone to complete them. They are looking for someone to share what is already complete. This changes everything. The relationships they form tend to be fewer, but deeper. They do not collect acquaintances like coins. They curate connections like a careful gardener, knowing that each relationship requires time, attention, and the space to breathe. They are not afraid of distance, physical or emotional, because they know that distance is not absence. It is simply the shape that allows two separate people to remain themselves. They say no to invitations without guilt, and the people who remain understand. They cancel plans when the tank is empty, and the people who stay do not take it personally. These are the keepers. These are the ones who understand that loving someone who loves solitude means trusting that the withdrawal is not rejection. It is simply the tide going out before it returns. In this way, solitude becomes the foundation, not the barrier. It is the root system that allows the branches to reach toward others without breaking. There is a quiet dignity in those who have mastered the art of being alone. It is visible in the way they move through crowded space as present but not grasping, available but not desperate. They carry something with them that others cannot see, a portable sanctuary, a room of their own that exists not in architecture but in awareness. They have learned what many spend a lifetime running from, that the self is not a problem to be solved, but a presence to be kept. In solitude, they have discovered that the mind is not merely a tool for navigating the external world. It is also a landscape, a terrain with valleys of memory and peaks of aspiration, rivers of grief and meadows of quiet joy. They have walked this landscape enough times to know its contours, to recognize its weather patterns, to find shelter when the storms come. They are not lost in themselves. They are at home in themselves. And so they move through life differently. They do not fear being alone with their thoughts, because their thoughts have become old friends. They do not panic when the conversation dies, because silence has never felt empty to them. They do not grasp at love, because they have learned that love, real love, begins in the space between two people who do not need each other but have chosen each other anyway. The world may never fully understand them. It may continue to ask questions, to express concern, to wonder why they spend so much time in the quiet. But the person who loves staying alone knows a secret that the noise cannot hear, that within them a world exists, a world vast enough to explore for a lifetime, a world that asks nothing of them but presence. And in that world, they are never alone. They are simply with themselves, and that they have learned is enough.